Hi there, it's Storyteller Mitch back with Lady Precious stream by Hsiung. As you can see, I now got a headset. I'll tell you where I got it. I live near the city of Red Deer in Alberta, and I got it from the source in the Bower Mall. It was like $30-ish. Anyway, let's get started on the next part. The stage is cleared and the erection of the beautiful pavilion is commenced. It is represented by an embroidered tapestry stretched on 3 poles fastened to a table. As soon as this is done, the great day, the 2nd of February, arrives. It is a fine day, and the Prime Minister Hsiung gets up early in the morning and takes a stroll in the garden, where he comes with 2 attendants preceding him. Hsiung, sitting down, says, "Today is the 2nd of February, the day on which I am going to take on a son-in-law into my family. I have been looking forward to it enormously, and I am very happy to find the weather is so fine. It is now quite near the hour of throwing the ball, and I must give my necessary instructions." He calls, "Attendants!" The attendants say, "Yes, Your Excellency." And I think I showed it last episode, but here you go. Here's another pretty picture. I love Chinese art. Hsiung says, "You must stay in the garden and guard the gate. Admit only those young gentlemen you know I like. As soon as the embroidered ball has been thrown, tell me the happy news at once." The attendants say, "Yes, Your Excellency." Hsiung gets up and retires. The attendants move to one side. 4 young gentlemen dressed in fine silk gowns come from the right. First suitor says, "Lady Precious Dream is as beautiful as the flowers are made." Second suitor says, "The 2nd of February is her wedding day." The third suitor says, "The young suitors came here happy and gay." The fourth suitor says, "Who will be the lucky one? Nobody can say." The first suitor says, "Here we have arrived. Let us knock at the gate." They turn and knock at the invisible garden gate. Loud knockings are heard. The first attendant says, "Yes, I am coming." He comes forward and opens the double doors of the gate with with both of his hands. "Good morning, my young lords. Have you gentlemen come to await the lucky ball?" All say, "Exactly." First attendant says, showing the way, "Come in, please." They all enter the gate, bending their heads and lifting their feet. The second attendant leads them to sit on the grass before the pavilion. Just then an old gentleman with a ridiculous mustache and beard comes running to the gate, and the attendant bars the way. "What are you fooling here for, my venerable old sir?" An old man says, "I come here to receive the lucky ball." First attendant, "Oh no, you are too old for that." The old man says, "Although my appearance seems to be old, my heart is young." The first attendant says, "It's no use. We don't care whether you have a heart or not." The old man says, "Let us discuss the matter. If I have no mustache and beard, may I enter then?" The first attendant says, "I am ready to consider that when you have no mustache and beard." The old man says, "All right, just 1 minute." He calls aloud, "Hey, barber, come here." He runs briskly away, and the first attendant closes the door. The old man immediately appears with a folding fan covering the lower half of his face and knocks repeatedly at the gate. "Open the gate, please." First attendant, opening the gate. "Who are you with the fan covering your face?" The old man says, "A young gentleman who wants to get the lucky ball." First attendant says, "Put down your fan, please." The old man says, "It will make me blush if I put it down." The first attendant says, "Blushing becomes a young face." Thus flattered, the old man puts down his fan and reveals a roughly shaved chin. The first attendant says, "So you are the venerable old gentleman. What have you done with your mustache and beard?" The old man says, "As I couldn't find a barber, and I have done it with a blunt sword, surely you will let me enter now." The first attendant says, "No, never." The old man says, "Why?" The first attendant. Don't you realize that you are a very old man? The old man talking of very sorry. The very old man said, talking of a very old man, you remember they have a very perverse temper. If you don't let me in, I will fight to the death to get in. If you do let me in, I will certainly refuse to go in. If you don't believe me, you may try now. The first attendant says, finding it impossible to refuse, all right, let us try. Now, venerable old sir, I won't let you in. The old man says, fighting desperately to get in, I must get in. The first attendant says, now then, venerable old sir, I cordially invite you to come in. He stands aside and bows. The old man says, since you are so pressing, he slips in quickly and sits among the other guests. The first attendant shakes his head and closes the door. All say, Lady Precious Stream is coming. They all stand up, 4 maids dressed in beautiful attire, each carrying an embroidered red silk lantern in her hand, laid the way. Precious Stream appears in a gorgeous frock, holding an embroidered ball in her hand, and walks attractively in front of the stage. Precious says, time flies, and today is the fatal day of the 2nd of February. Although I am anxious to be free from suspense, now that the fatal moment has come, I feel nervous and should like it to be the first to be postponed. The noise of voices in garden tells me that it is rather clouded, and I wonder whether Si Pinghui is coming. He promised me that he would never fail me, so I needn't trouble myself about his presence. But the idea of going up to the pavilion and throwing down the embroidered ball while the crowd looks on makes me feel very shy, and I don't know how I shall ever manage to carry on my maids. Maids say, yes, my lady. Precious says, lead the way to the pavilion, please. Maids say, yes, my lady. They file around 3 times and place themselves at the 2 sides of the pavilion, whilst Precious Stream is assisted to mount the table behind the tapestry. With her head and shoulders Precious Stream is assisted to mount the table behind the tapestry, with her head and shoulders showing over it. Precious says, surveying the crowd represented by the 5 suitors, now I must look carefully. There are princes dressed in red, and there are young nobles dressed in green. Those clad in yellow are the sons of rich merchants, and those in blue are heirs to the great landowners. Hold on, I'm going to take a drink so you don't hear it. Alrighty. Haha. Still getting used to this thing. Cheers from the crowd. There is a louder cheer from the crowd below, which makes me blush, but I must find where Sei Pinghui is standing. I have looked from east to west, and now I must look from north to south. Again and again I have looked for him, but nowhere is he to be seen. I remember clearly when I gave him the silver, I told him to come on this day, and he promised he would. But he has proved unfaithful. Oh, woe is me. I must retire without throwing the ball. And there's another nice picture. The first suitor says, no, you mustn't go back. The second suitor, throw the ball before you go, please. The third suitor, how can you desert us? The fourth suitor, I have been waiting all morning. The old man says, I have shaved my beard specially for you. Precious says, ah, now I see him emerging from that corner. To the suitors, now, gentlemen, please come here to the pavilion and listen to my words. I want all of you to pledge your word of honor to me that you will uphold the man who, by will of the God, is going to be my husband, whoever he may be. And moreover, that you will swear that you, one and all, will draw your swords against him who will not uphold the destined match. All say, we swear, we swear. By the time Hsiung has appeared and is trying to conceal himself in the left corner. Precious Dream says, the marriage is to be arranged by the will of God, and we mortars have to abide by this arrangement. She raises the embroidered ball. Now, catch the ball! Amid loud shrieks, she throws it to the corner where Say is standing. He catches it before any of the other suitors have even seen it. The first suitor says, where is the lucky ball? The second suitor says, who has got it? The third suitor says, has anyone of you caught it? The fourth suitor, I felt it passing above my head. The old man dreamily says, then it must be in my lap. All say, oh! They all rush to him. The old man weakly, thank God it is not here, otherwise I should be done for. Say says, coming out with the ball in his hand, here it is. All say, oh! They all rush to him. Say says, striking an attitude with holding them at bay, halt, all of you. The man who dares to touch me will receive his death blow. The first suitor says, who are you that dares to come among us? The second suitor says, you are a servant of the house. The third suitor says, no, but even worse, a beggar. The fourth suitor says, that's right, I saw you begging in the street only a few months ago. The old man says, look here, let me give you 200 cash, and you will give the ball to me. Say looks at him in disdain. Precious says, gentlemen, remember all of you who have pledged your word of honor to me, and you must remember your pledge. Now, like decent folk, congratulate him and me. She begins to come down the pavilion. The first attendant says to the second attendant, this is some real news. Let us go and tell His Excellency at once. They go, all clasping their hands together to salute the lucky man disdainfully. Congratulations! Say, returning the salute, thanks! All going to Precious Dream, who has now come down from the pavilion, our hearty congratulations. Clasping their hands together, they bow very low. Precious says, curtsying, many thanks. I want you to stay for a long time, and perhaps you may render me a service. All say, delighted with pleasure. His Excellency Wang comes running with 2 attendants. Wang says, where is my new son-in-law? Where is my new son-in-law? He brings himself face to face with Say, who confronts his astonished stare with calmness and dignity. Say, nearly rubbing his nose on his future father-in-law's nose, at your service, my dear father-in-law. Wang, squinting with rage, puffing up his mustache and beard, and shaking his head insensibly, faints, slowly but steadily, with the help of a property man, on his back on the stage swoon. Precious says, fanning him with her sleeves, oh, father, father. All doing the same, oh, your excellency, your excellency. Wang says, coming to himself again, he sits on the ground, oh, my God. Precious says, yes, dear father, this is indeed the will of God. All the will of God. Wang, getting up and sitting on a chair, says, but I won't have it. I will take the matter away from God into my own hands. Precious says, but father, aren't you glad? You said our family needed a poet, and now we have one. God has granted your wish. Wang says, we will see whether God will grant me a different wish. The first attendant says to the second attendant, it seems some terrible trouble is about to take place. Let us go and report to Madam. They go. Precious says to the suitors, now, my gallant suitors, did you not swear that you would draw your swords against him who dared not uphold a distant match? All said, yes, we did. Wang's to Precious Dream says, what? You have conspired against your own father. Precious says, I never dreamt that it would be you whom we should have to deal with. Wang says to the suitors who, to our regret, were once his favorites, you fools! To think that I once liked you. I am a blind fool. Now get out, all of you. He goes and opens the gate and leads them out one by one, holding their left ears. The first suitor says, Lady Precious Dream is as beautiful as the flowers are May. The second suitor says, the 2nd of February is our wedding day. The third suitor says, the young suitors come here happy and gay. The fourth suitor says, but when they are leaving they say, woe is the day. You rub their ears and leave. Wang, seeing a strange face, says, and may who you be? The old man says, behind his folding fan, one of the young suitors. Wang, giving him a kick, says, it is a relief to have someone whom I do not know and whom I can kick. The old man says, rubbing his back, thank God that he hasn't recognized me, stroking his chin. Oh, what shall I do? My grandchildren won't recognize me either. He goes. Madam Golden Stream, Silver Stream, Su Wei come with 2 attendants. After very brief greetings, they are all seated except Precious Stream and Say. Madam says to Precious Stream, why don't you sit down, my dear? Precious Stream says, so long as my future husband is not given a seat, I can't sit down, dear mother. Madam says, then be seated, both of you. Wang says, no, this is the house of the Prime Minister, not a beggar's hut. How can he be allowed to sit down here? Madam says, dear, you are only making the situation worse. Come, don't be headstrong. Let us all sit down and talk over the matter and see what is to be done. Wang sulkily says, all right, have your own way. Madam says, now be seated, please. Say says, thank you, madam. He sits next to Wei, who turns away in disgust. Precious says, thank you, dear mother, and I am now waiting for your instructions, dear father. Wang says, I have no instructions for you. It is he whom I want to deal with. Say, man, on what condition will you let her be free? I'll look at Say, who ignores the question. Wei says, allow me to arrange for you, dear father-in-law. I know how to deal with this sort of customer. To Say, look here, my man. No answer. Say, my friend. No answer. Ho Say Ping Kui. Still no answer. Mr. Say Ping Kui? Say says, what is your wish, my great general? Wei says, don't be cross, Mr. Say. You know it would never do for Lady Precious Stream to marry you, a poor man. I quite understand that this is for you a great chance and that you must have a handsome price before you let go your hold. Say says fiercely, I don't understand your meaning. Silver Stream says, you can't bully my husband. Bully him back, my dear. Wei says, be quiet, dear. To Say again. I mean that if you will let us off quietly without any scandal, I am sure my father-in-law is willing to forgive you. Say, Silver Stream says, 100 taels of silver. Say is looking daggers. Wei says, no, say 200. Silver says, no, a farthing more. Say turns away in anger. Wang says, I am a just and generous man. I will offer you 500 taels. Silver says, oh. Wei says, now be a sensible, my man. No answer. Well, how much do you want, Mr. Say? Say vehemently, I want nothing from you, sir. Even millions and billions cannot buy me off. The decision lies with Lady Precious Stream. If she thinks that I am not her equal and that this is but a lamentable mistake, just let her say the word and I will go away without taking a farthing from you. Precious says, beautiful. Sue says, it's quite right. Madam says, dear, dear. Golden says, he is playing a game. Wang says, my dear daughter, you know that to me you are dearer than all. Now say the word and let us get out of this disgrace. Wei says, and if a Mr. Say actually refuses to take any money, then the 500 taels you promised, dear father-in-law, ought to be given to me as a reward for acting so as a go-between. Silver says, of course father will reward you, dear. Precious says, I am sorry to deprive you of a reward. I will stick to my match. To my sister I am not worth 100 taels, and to my brother-in-law only 200, and even to my father, who professes that he loves me dearer than all, I am worth only 500. Wang says, no, in my heart I was prepared to offer 1,000. Precious says, thank you, father. I see I'm getting on. You seem to think that one would prefer to have let us say 1,000 taels rather than to have me, and here is the man who refuses to take millions and billions and prefers me instead. Shall I be so ungrateful as to give him the go-by and to remain with those who value me so little? No, father, I decline. Get out of there, kitty. Wow. Golden says, so would I. Madam moved, dear, dear. Sue, very noble. Silver says, very silly. Wei, it's too bad. My 500 taels gone. Wang says impatiently, shut up. I can stand this no longer. If you were insisting on marrying him, all I can say is this, that a beggar girl is going to marry a beggar and remain one. You need not expect any dowry from me. No, not even a farthing. All say, oh! Say says, I have already said that I won't take a farthing from you. Precious says, no, father, not a beggar girl to a beggar, but a working girl to a worker. We both can work. Wang says, you work? Impossible. Silver says, don't you think that it will soil your beautiful satin and silk dresses? Precious says, no, because I will not wear them. She begins to take off her outer garments while all the rest of the family crowd around her to screen her. They resume their seats as soon as the disrobing is over, and she puts the garments she has taken off on one of her arms. She is now on a plain black ground with white sleeves. The ancient proverb says, a good son will not depend upon his father's wealth, and a good daughter will not depend upon her family for clothes. Here I am giving back to you these fine clothes. She gives him the clothes. It's a property man who receives them. And here are the jewels, too. She undoes her jewels rapidly and gives them to her father. Madam says, oh dear, don't. Golden says, my poor sister. Sue says, a brave girl. Silver says, I wonder how they will manage to live. Wei says they will soon die of starvation. Wang, still enraged, says, do you mean that you will leave us and follow that man to the gutter? Precious says, even if we were in the gutter, we would not be in the gutter long. Wang says, oh yes, probably you will come back to me when you find that you are starving. Wei says, yes, she will come back when slightly damaged. Silver says, we won't take back damaged goods. Precious says, that is far from the case, and if I come back to see you, dear mother, it will be when we can raise our heads higher than any of you can. Wei says, don't dream in the broad daylight. Silver says, wake up, please. Precious says, to be rich or poor is the will of God, and success or failure is ruled by destiny. You never can tell beforehand what may happen. Wang says, I can tell that poverty and failure will be your lot, but don't come to me for help. Madam says, never mind your father, dear. We will always be glad to help you, but you are not really going to leave us for good, are you? Golden says, please don't, dear sister. Precious says, I am afraid I'll have to. My place is to be at my husband's side, for better or for worse. Wang says, but I bet you will be glad to leave him very soon. Precious says, do you dare to lay a wager definitely by clapping hands 3 times with me, father? Wang says, certainly. And you, do you dare? All say, oh, please don't. Precious says, certainly, I'll call upon all of you here to witness. Today, I hereby make a wager by clapping hands with my father 3 times. She does so. That my husband and I will never come back to the Prime Minister's house unless we are rich and successful. All say, oh, it can't be helped now. Precious says to Say, now will you come and bid farewell to your father-in-law? Say says, yes. She clasps his hands together and bows to Wang, who turns away. Precious says, and to your mother-in-law. Say does the same. She says, no, you must kneel down to her to show that you hold the female sex in higher esteem. Say kneels and kowtows. Again, please. He does so. Madam, please, says, I am sure you will make a very good hen-pecked husband. Precious says, to your sisters-in-law, too. Say clasps his hands together and bows to them. Golden says, returning the salute, I wish you all good luck. Silver says, turning away, it's getting very late now. Precious says, and to your brothers-in-law. Say does the same. Sue, returning the salute cordially, I wish you very happiness and success. Say says, thank you very much. I won't forget your kindness. Wei says, ignoring him and turning away, I think we ought to return now. Precious says, now stand aside and wait a moment for me. To her father, my dear father, your humble daughter, Precious Steam, pays her respects. Wang gruffly says, no, you needn't consider me as your father. Precious says charmingly, then I must at least thank you for your share in my birth. She kneels and kowtows. Wang says, it was a mere accident. Silver says, and a sad one too. Precious says, kneeling before her mother, my dear, dear mother, I can never thank you enough, and I shall miss you very much. She weeps. Madam, getting up from her seat and embracing her, says, my dear, remember that your mother will always be ready to help you. Precious says, no, thank you all the same, mother. I won't have any help from the Wang family. Silver says, a daughter who is married and left her family is like water poured into the street, as the old saying goes. Golden says, don't say that, sister. Precious says, it's quite all right, and I hope she will realize someday that she is like the water poured into the street. She curtsies to them. Goodbye, my dear sisters. Golden says, don't say goodbye. Surely you will allow me to call on you. Precious says, that depends. Silver says, goodbye, dear sister. I do hope we shall soon meet again if you repent. Precious says, never. Curtsies to Sue and Wei. Goodbye, my brothers-in-law. Sue, returning the salute, says, goodbye for the present, and I will be present at your wedding. Precious says, it will be a very simple one, and if you are busy, Sue says, no, I must be there. Wei says, I regret to say I'm rather busy at the present, so if you will excuse me. Precious says, certainly, we want no unwilling guest. Goodbye, and I hope never to see your beautiful face again. Wei, flattered, it will be at your service if you find it to be beautiful. Precious says, I would like to slap it whenever I see it. Wei says, oh! Silver says, for shame, such a handsome face, too. Precious says to Say, now let us leave here for good and prepare for the wedding. Say says, I will always honor you. Precious says, and I will obey you. He says, I will protect you. Precious says, I will love you. They go out. Wei says, disgusting. Silver says, scandalous. And Wang says, let us retire. They retire according to order. And this is the end of Act 1. And you will continue at Act 2. Alright. Hope you enjoy. Have fun out there and have a good one. Ciao.